It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live as well on YouTube at youtube.com/@theteam980, where you just got a show of Anthony Haney dancing to Atomic Dog. All right, when we left our heroes at the Washington Commanders, they were preparing for the NFL draft, and they had a pretty big decision on their hands, Anthony Haney. That decision was what to do with Chase Young. And I would say, drum roll, please, we have a decision. But you all know that by now because we live in an era of smartphones and everyone got the same alert I did. Here's the thing. Commanders have declined their option on Chase Young. And it is, to me, an absolute no-brainer. This is the correct decision. I don't really understand how anyone makes an argument otherwise, although people will try. It comes down to very simple math. 17 and 18. Those are the two relevant numbers. And the 17 is how much it was going to cost you to pick up the option. And the 18 is how much it's going to cost you to franchise tag him next year. The other numbers here are whatever the sum totals of Daron Payne and John Allen's contracts are, because those two you've already committed to. They are in your long-term plans and not going anywhere. And because you chose to commit to them, there is simply no responsible way, even with Sam Howell. Let's say Sam Howell's incredible. And you know, we got our franchise quarterback and we have him on the best contract that basically any team in football is going to have their starting quarterback on, outside of the San Francisco 49ers and Brock Purdy, because he was a 7th rounder instead of the 5th rounder that Howell is. Let's say you have that luxury. You still should not spend over $20 million per lineman on defensive linemen. On 2 of them, fine. On 3 of them, you're pushing it. On 4 of them, you're now cutting from other places on the roster. Like, could you do it? Sure. Is it responsible and smart? I would say no. I think there is one scenario where, again, if Howell works out and, you know, a bunch of your draft picks hit, could you make some kind of argument that, okay, we're going to not do this, or we're going to do it because John Allen is coming up in a couple of years already, because you'll be 3 years into his deal, and if you think you're going to wind up letting him go. But we don't need to get into all that. It's fairly simple. You're 95% likely not keeping one of Chase Young or Montez Sweat next season. You 100%, if you want Ron Rivera and you are trying to win now, want them both for this season. Once you accept that, and even frankly if you don't, even if you want to say like there's a situation where you should trade one of them now, I would disagree with that. But I think the best bet for this team is to play out this season, see who is the better player, who it is that you want to keep long-term, what they're going to cost, and then you still, and this is where everybody, and I will admit myself probably hadn't thought this out enough, you still have the ability to control them next year if you do exactly what you did with Daron Payne. And more direct in terms of the comparison, all you have to do is do what the Giants just did with Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. Because they had the same issue. 1 tag, 2 guys. Don't want to let either of them hit free agency. So you let this year play out, and let's say that they're both good, and you pick Chase. Chase is the guy you want to keep. You, as quickly as you can, now Chase has got to play his part, but you, as quickly as you can after the season, probably sometime during the combine before the franchise tag deadline, work on an agreement to extend Chase Young or sign him to a new deal, whatever the verbiage is, right? You get that one done because it's before the end of the league year. Technically, it's an extension. Sweet. Done. Now, you can use your tag on Daron Payne on Montez Sweat, and then you trade him. You put the non-exclusive tag on, and the worst-case scenario is he signs it, and then you have him for an extra year. And yeah, you might lose him the following year for nothing, but it either like he's going to bust and he's not worth it and you let him hit free agency and it's not that big of a deal and you probably wind up getting a third-round comp pick anyway, or you're getting Montez Sweat on a huge discount. Same could be true in reverse. If Chase is awesome, but you decide that Montez is the guy you want to keep for whatever reason, financial, scheme fit, whatever, new owner coming in with, potential new staff, whoever's making that decision at the time, they decide that they want to keep Montez Sweat over Chase Young, but Chase has a good enough year that someone's going to want to sign him. You simply tag him, and then you work out the trade. And then the worst case scenario is you are way overpriced on 1 year, and you don't have your franchise tag to use on anyone else, which we'll get to in a second. And then you just have 4 really, 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 really good football players that you've had for 5 to 6 years, and the prime of their careers, in probably like some of the prime years, and you've underpaid them the entire time because that's how rookie deals work, and because if you use the franchise tag next year, and that number is $18 million for either Young or Sweat, that's less than the $23 to $24 million they would get on the open market. That's a good place to be. Now, some people might say, but Craig, Cam Curl is also up. There's a bunch of players that are up. In fact, it's like every defensive end that they have on the entire roster is up. Yes, you can afford to re-sign some of them, and some of them you're going to have to let walk. That's the nature of the league. You can't retain all your free agents all the time. A guy like Kendall Fuller, you might have to let walk. It's part of the league. You plan ahead. Curtis Samuel, you either restructure him this year or you just let him walk after the year. Antonio Gibson, same thing. He's a running back. Most running backs don't get to the second contract. And if it is a second contract, it's not going to be a very big one. And if someone wants to sign him for big money, take the comp pick, go draft another guy who's probably going to be pretty close to as productive as Antonio Gibson. That's the way the NFL works. The one big one that's hanging out there is Cam Curl, and I think they can fix that problem by getting Cam Curl signed to an extension this summer. We haven't hit extension season yet. That's May, June, July. Maybe sometimes it happens in August. Or sometimes it does happen in August. Maybe it happens for Cam Curl in August. But if you lock up Curl, now you're just staring down, signing Young or Sweat, giving the other one the tag, making the trade, and then you're set. To me, that is a much better state of play than if you did the opposite today, which is pick up Chase Young's fifth-year option. Because then you run the risk of this. Chase Young being bad for whatever, and bad is going to be relative. He's going to flash. He's going to have moments of brilliance. But let's say he returns to the undisciplined form that he had in 2022 that was 2021 that was very problematic for their defense, that he doesn't produce the sack numbers, that he just doesn't look the same on injury, that the personality quirks that bothered Ron Rivera, going to shoot a Chipotle commercial instead of showing up for whatever, either come up again and Rivera's ticked and doesn't want to deal with it anymore and he's still here, or is a turnoff to a new coach. And you've already committed to that guy for $17 million, and now you can't sign Sweat. Now your cap space is tied up prematurely. You can't make the math work, and you lose Montez Sweat for nothing. Sure, technically you could tag him, and then you got to figure out a lot of cap stuff. But you, instead of having that flexibility to work with, you're now having to work around Chase's deal. For a player, you don't want at that number. What today did was take the risk off the table of overpaying a guy you don't want here at all next year. And that's a distinct possibility with Chase depending on how things play out. Now, if I'm a betting man, I'm betting on Chase Young. I think there is something inside that dude, and I think the talent is so overwhelming that he will figure it out on some level. I also think that it's possible that Montez is still the right guy to keep long-term, and that Chase, his value could be in trade bait next offseason. But the problem is his value now is at what you hope is an all-time low. So trading him when his value is low is a bad time to trade him if you're trying to get assets back in return. So, to me, this was a no-brainer. I've heard people calling into the station all day. I was listening to Sheehan earlier, and I listened to a little bit of Russell as well as we were prepping for our show. And I know some of you guys disagree. I want to talk through it. Let's go. 301-230-0980. To me, this is a no-brainer. That is why. But what say you? Chase Young, fifth-year option declined by the Commanders. Your call's on it next. 301-230-0980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube as well. YouTube.com/@theteam980. If you're watching there, make sure you subscribe so you do not miss any of our station content on the old interwebs. All right, So, taking your calls, 301-230-0980. Talking about, obviously, the decision for the Commanders. They declined Chase Young's option. It was a $17.5 million option. So, what do you think of the decision? I explained, obviously, what I thought there in the first segment. Hopefully, you responded or you were listening, and you're not just going to say things that run contrary to everything I just said. But let's give it a go, shall we? 301-230-0980. Still room to agree, disagree. Let's start off with Nate, who I believe disagrees. Nate, what you got for us here? Get us started.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Yeah, I think they should have picked up Chase's fifth-year option, only from the stance of the organization. Honestly, like what I'm trying to say is, like protecting itself, because I believe personally they kind of the way they did it, they kind of devalued Chase Young a little bit. And then also, if I'm another team and I'm looking like they're not going to release, they're thinking about not keeping them on anything, then I'm not looking to make no trade. I'm just, gonna wait till you let them go, and then I'm gonna pick them up.
But here's the thing, Nate. Like they didn't let him go today. It's not like they released him. He plays this year.
Right.
So if he goes out and balls out, other teams are going to want him. And if that's the case, but the Commanders still don't want to keep him, then they franchise tag him, and then they can trade him from there. Like they didn't end their options today, which is why to me it was a no-brainer to decline it.
Right. Well, that's my thing. Like I don't think like you said, I don't think that they want to keep him. So maybe that's why they didn't pick up their fifth-year option. I don't know if they do, but if they do want to keep him after he has a monster, if he has a monster year, and they want to keep him, to me, I think that's why you pick up the fifth-year option.
Well, at that point, you tag him, and it's basically no price. It's $1 million more than if you had done the option.
That's true, but then if I'm Chase Young, what if I don't want to be here? And I say, okay, you tag me. I just treat you like Kirk Cousins did. You could tag me once, tag me twice, and then I go somewhere else and get paid.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's his prerogative, but they also would. But like at some point, Nate, he's going to hit free agency. Like unless he signs a long-term deal. Like it's sure, I guess you could delay that by a year potentially by a tag or a picking up the option and then a potential tag. But like that's playing for only best case scenarios and kind of ignores the fact that if he balls out and they want to keep him, they'd probably want to sign him to a long-term deal anyway.
Right, but what I'm saying is, if I'm Chase Young, the way things are going, this is me personally, and I ball out and you didn't pick up my fifth-year option, well, I'm going to say back up the Brinks truck, you know what I'm saying? Or I'm not going to want to be here. You're just going to have to treat me like Kirk Cousins. If you would have picked up my fifth-year option, I might have been a little more lenient.
That's not how any of this works. Nate, with all due respect, that's not how any of this works. Because if someone offered you $23 million a year and that was your market value, you would take it. That's how that works.
Yeah, but we also could be making a mistake.
Feelings don't have a place in the NFL when it comes to contract negotiations. And when they do, that's how players do dumb stuff.
That's true, but what I'm saying as an organization, like, don't give up yet on the good thing, because look what
they're not giving up on him.
Here with Drew Brees.
They're not giving up on him. Like, that's Nate. Thanks for the call. They're not giving up on him. That's the whole point. What they're doing is putting themselves in a position to protect themselves in case Chase is not the guy that they thought he was when they drafted him number 2 overall. But that doesn't mean if all of a sudden, finally a year removed from the ACL, he balls out, that they still don't have every single bit of control next year that they had if they exercised the option. All they did was close the door on their ability to get out if they pick up that option. They now have that door open. But all the other doors that include a short-term franchise tag or long-term negotiating a new contract are still available. And if the concern is that Chase Young's feelings are going to get hurt, it's real easy to overcome some hurt feelings by offering someone a top market value contract. Deron Payne's just fine. Every other player in NFL history that's taken a lot of money is just fine. but he's got to earn that money first, and frankly, he hasn't. Let's go to Bones. Bones, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
My man Craig Hoffman.
What up, Bones?
Shout out to Anthony Haney, man. You know, some people, man, they just don't be listening, man. You know, I don't know why, man. A lot of these folks, man, around here are so enamored with Chase Young, man. It ain't like Chase Young been tearing it up. You know, Chase Young ain't been no dominant player, man, on this team, man. You know, I'm trying to figure out what these people, be in those feelings for, man, because, we be talking, you talking about you having this type of discussion. This is a legitimate, football discussion, and they did the right thing by not picking up that option, man. This guy got to come in here and prove himself, you know what I mean? He ain't no Max Crosby or none of them Bosa brothers or Michael Parsons or nothing. Chase Young ain't did none of that, man.
Not yet. Not yet.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He gotta show that to me as well.
Right.
Because I need to see that as well.
Yeah, thanks for the call, man. He hasn't. And his best production was before a monstrous knee injury. Patella ACL is the kind of thing that can change someone's entire athletic profile for the rest of their life. And part of the appeal of Chase Young was he was an athletic freak. And so if he's not that, you can't go out and pay him like that. And that's unlucky. What I don't want to do is turn this into some referendum on the pick at the time. What I don't want to do is turn this into some, hey, Chase Young sucks. It's not that. I thought Chase played well in the final 3 games. Still a little timid, still a little rusty, but he was joining the season in December. No kidding. He hadn't played football in a long time. But he showed the discipline and played a lot more cohesively with the rest of the defensive line than he had in 2021 in those final 3 games. I still think something people need to realize is there's a leadership element to him that's special. And guys follow him. So there are reasons why a year from now you may look back and go, oh, shucks, wish we would have picked that one up. Could have saved us some money for this 5th year. Now we have to negotiate a contract, or we have to go through the franchise tag dance, which is always uncomfortable. I'm not saying there won't be some level of regret, but you're playing the odds, and you eventually have to put on your big boy pants and make business decisions. And that's what the Commanders did today. They made a smart, really smart business decision with very little downside the way I see it. Now, if Chase gets in his feelings and his agent gets mad and all this kind of stuff, okay. But I don't Chase is represented by one of the best agents in football who's been around these negotiations a time or two. That's why you have an agent, so that you don't get in your feelings. You let them handle your business. 301-230-0980. We were going to do Mock the Mock next, but I think we should take some more calls on Chase. 301-230-0980. More of your calls on Chase Young having his 5th-year option declined by the Commanders next on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Ben Standig going to join us at the top of the hour to discuss the news of the day that Chase Young has had his fifth-year option declined by the Washington Commanders. So I think this is a no-brainer. Basic, simple version of my take is that you still have the flexibility next year to franchise tag him. And while you can't franchise tag both him and Montez Sweat, you're going to want to sign one to a long-term deal anyway. So you get that deal done, and then you can franchise tag and trade the other one, because paying all four of them plus Allen and Payne would be recklessly irresponsible in terms of the salary cap and allocation of resources. Let's take some more calls on this, though. 301-230-0980. Eric, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, Craig, thanks for taking my call.
You got it.
100% agree with everything you're saying. It was when I saw the news today at work, I'm like, well, finally we got someone smart at Ashburn who understands football business sense. This is because you got both your defensive ends coming in next year looking for long-term deals. More than likely, they're going to show up and show out next year. And one gets 15, the other one gets 13 sacks. You know, take your pick, whichever one. Either way, it's the most production that you'll have at a defensive end spot in years. And going forward, you're setting your team up for success by signing one to a long-term deal and franchising trading the other one. Either one's going to get you valuable assets coming back. Don't get me wrong. I love Chase Young. I know he's from the area, and I'm pulling for him. I really am pulling for him. I broke my leg recently, and I had my knee surgically repaired recently. I get where he's coming from as far as trusting it, but this is his opportunity to show up and show out like he did at the end of last year.
Yeah, Eric.
And he showed flashes of what he's capable of.
No doubt. Thanks for the call, and best of luck recovering from your injury. That's an ouch. Broken leg, knee surgery. Ooh, don't love that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's also important to remember not only are these two playing for contracts, Casey Tuhill, James Smith-Williams, the other two guys that'll be in rotation there, F.A. Obata, re-signed on a one-year deal, but James and Casey are both at the end of their deals as well. Everybody's going to try to show out. What I think needs to also be said, though, is showing out isn't just going out and getting sacks. Like, it's playing as a cohesive member of this unit. If you want to be here long-term, presuming that, you know, there's not wholesale changes on the coaching staff, being a part of a top 5 defense is what's going to do that, more than if you go out and get 15 sacks as part of a crap defense. You go out and give up 26 points a game and are bottom third of the league and you get your coach fired, but sure, you got 15 sacks. Someone's going to pay you a lot of money, but I don't know how. I don't think it's as much as if you had 13 sacks, perhaps, plus we're part of a top 5 defense. Everybody gets paid on winning teams. And I think that's an important thing to remember is, like, yes, the sack numbers are important, quarterback hits, and people will look at that, pressure rates, some of the advanced stuff that PFF gives you. But nothing can replace starter on a top 5 defense. Best player on a top 5 defense, potentially in Chase's case, if he can get to the level that he was thought to be able to reach when he came out in the draft. Let's keep going on the calls. 301-230-0980. Brian, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, Craig, how you doing?
I'm good, man.
So I was calling in, and I was saying, Chase to me is a bum, but I think that's a little harsh.
That is correct. And we don't call people bums on this show. We came close on Dylan Brooks yesterday, but that's a different story.
Okay. Well, I'm going to back off of that. I do think he's a little bit of a bust, not because of injury, because of his play in the second year and after that playoff game. I was very disgusted. But the thing is that it seems like a lot of people we're supposed to have this empathy for business when it comes to doing business in the NFL for people who get hurt. And don't get me wrong, that is just for fans to feel bad for him. But no way, shape, or form should the team take a fifth-year option because he was hurt and we got to give him more time. No, this is business. I think it was a very smart move not to pick up that fifth-year option. And be honest with you, I don't think Montez Sweat is that good of a guy either. I just think as far as Washington standards, yeah, sure, they're great here, but we could do a whole lot better. There's Hall of Fame. We need to be looking for the next great. And I don't think either one of them are the next great. And I wouldn't pass up on trade or drafting another.
Brian, I I'm with you on you can have empathy as a human being for someone like Chase because of the injury while also not making a silly business decision. I'm with you there. I think that's very well put. You realize how hard it is to find a Hall of Famer?
I do realize it's hard, but I wouldn't sit here and fall in love and keep a guy for years and years because you drafted him and he's a.
But what if he's really
Washington,
good? Like Montez Sweat could be. I don't know that Montez Sweat's going to the Hall of Fame, but he could be a Ring of Honor player. He's that good.
But would you not draft another one if you have a chance to?
That's a different story. Like I think Edge is on the table in the draft, 100%.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it should be on the table at all times. If that player is not a Hall of Fame sold guy, we should always be looking to get better. That's all I'm saying.
I agree with that, Brian. Thanks for the call. And let me even expound on that a little bit because I don't think that you need 4 guys. You'd ideally like to have one of them be a pretty significant, discount. You'd ideally like one of them to be on a rookie deal. And that's kind of the problem for next year and why you ultimately, hopefully, have both Chase and Montez have awesome years. Make the decision hard on these guys. Make it so that it is really tough for this front office to let someone go, but they ultimately pick one and re-sign that guy to a pretty healthy contract. And then you draft another guy, whether it's next year or look, if you love Nolan Smith out of Georgia and you think he could be the guy, or Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa, or Miles Murphy out of Clemson, whoever it is that you think is the guy in this draft, if he falls to you at 16 and you actually legitimately think he's a Hall of Famer, hell yeah, you take that guy. But I don't think most people see those prospects as that level. You'd be frankly lucky if any of them turn into as good of a player as Montez Sweat is, and Montez Sweat can really help you win football games. And so let's not, just because a guy's not going to the Hall of Fame, because he's not Von Miller or Reggie White or, a Bosa brother or, J.J. Watt, doesn't mean that he's not worth a lot of money and can't help you win a lot of football games. And it doesn't mean you can't keep searching. Ryan Kerrigan's not going to the Hall of Fame. I don't think it was dumb for them to have him around here for a decade. So there's a lot of space between not worth having, not good. And look, sometimes guys get overpaid, and that makes them not worth having. If their market value is too much, you let them go or you trade them or whatever. But just because Montez Sweat may not be what people thought Chase Young could be, and we'll see if Chase can get there as well, doesn't mean that he's not worth keeping around potentially after the season. 301-230-0980. Let's go to Mark. Mark, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, Greg. So I think this is a good discussion. I think that the Commanders had the right idea, but I think it was the wrong move because, my question would be, what is Chase Young's trade value if you don't pick up the 5th-year option? If he's balling out, during, mid-season, and you're like, all right, before the trade deadline, let's get rid of him. Let's trade him because, we can pick up great assets. Well, who's going to trade for him if
hold on.
Have the 5th-year
There's
option?
a problem with that, Mark. If he's balling out, you would assume it would be on a team that's winning, and winning is also important. So you're saying if they're terrible and then he's balling out, at that point, sure, I guess
now,
you could trade him.
Even now though, if you wanted to trade him, we know how Mike Tomlin loved him. We all saw the clip. I don't want to ever lose a mini game to get you. If you call Pittsburgh right now, who would trade for him if he doesn't have that extra year? I don't think they should have picked up the 5th-year option in terms of the idea behind it. But if you're planning on trading him, what's the value?
Guys get traded on the franchise tag, not all the time, but with some regularity, and that you'd be in the same position anyway next year. That's my point is and I don't know if you tuned in a little bit late and missed my opening segment, but the difference in $17 million and $18 million, $17 million being the tag, or sorry, $17 million being the option, $18 million being the tag, is just that $1 million. Where next year you can tag him at 18 and then trade him, and it doesn't have to be the 2 first. Obviously, if a team wanted to sign him to a deal, because you would use the non-exclusive tag on him. And if they want to give you 2 firsts, hallelujah, give me those 2 firsts, and we'll talk later.
Yeah.
But they can work out another deal and say hey, we would like to give you a first or 2 seconds or whatever, and then we'll take care of the contract, the new team would probably re-sign him to a new deal anyway. Like, that's the thing is when guys get traded, typically part of the trade is then we're going to sign you to a new contract. So I get what you're saying in terms of, like, sure, is it a little more appealing if you could theoretically have him on $17 million and then franchise tag him on a first-year franchise tag number the year after? But if you're going to trade for Chase Young, you're doing it because you want him long-term, not because you're trying to do the short-term game. Does that make sense?
Yeah, man, I got you on that one.
All right, cool. I appreciate you bringing that up, though, because, like, it's a good point. Thanks for the call. 301-230-0980 is the phone number if you want to try to get in on this. We might take a few more, might just go ahead and pop over to the mock draft portion of the program. We do a segment called Mock the Mock where we have fun with some of the mock drafts that are out there. There are a ton as we near, obviously, the draft tomorrow. Yes, the NFL draft is tomorrow, including one from Albert Breer that has perhaps the most intriguing prospect in the entire draft on the board at 16, only for Washington to pass on him. We'll fill you in on that after we tell you what's trending here on the Team 980. take one more call real quick on the Chase Young stuff, and then we will get into Albert Breer's mock draft, where I think he does something that would be very silly for the Commanders. And I'm not talking about the guy he picks. I'm talking about the guy that he passes on. But let's go to Roberto real quick, who's been patiently waiting on hold. Roberto, ¿cómo estás? How you doing? And what's your take on the Chase Young situation?
Todo chévere, baby, todo chévere. But Chase Young did the same thing to the notion of him being a leader. When he chose to go make money instead of being with the boys, everybody showed up except him. Anyway, it's all good. Well, right now, show me, baby.
Yeah.
You want the money? You want to make money? Show me.
All right, Roberto. I mean, I do think the leadership stuff is super interesting. Anthony, I don't know how much have you watched some of the stuff that the Commanders have put out this offseason, like their what do they call it? The command log stuff?
The command log?
Yeah, it's like a YouTube series they're doing.
Nah, I haven't paid too much.
So episode 1 had, and like we've seen obviously Chase on the sidelines and all that kind of stuff, right? But episode 1 they did at the end of last season, and they had a bunch of guys sit down for interviews. And I would challenge anyone to watch that, Your Welcome Commanders digital team. But watch that and watch Chase Young's interviews and the way he talks and not go, oh, that's different. There's something a little bit different there, something a little special there. Because that was part of the eval with him, was that it wasn't just the on-the-field freakishness where people thought he could be just like the Bosa brothers before him at Ohio State, where he obviously has not lived up to that, in part because of the injury, but also before the injury in 21 was not good. But there is a little more to him in terms of the star power, the pizzazz, the leadership, the off-the-field stuff. And that's why it's been super interesting. There's been all these rumors or just flat-out complaints about him off the field. That whether it's the Chipotle ads and whatever else, which, not great, the miscommunication between him and the team, or seemingly lack of understanding between him and the team last year around his injury and the rehab and the timeline. But if he can get back to that, and if he can kind of grow up, mature, if that's what they think, I don't want to put that on Chase because I don't know enough. But if that's what they think and he can do that, well, now you're talking about a pretty expensive player. But he's got to show it, like Roberto said. But we will see. All right, it's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Want to switch gears and talk about this mock draft that Albert Breer did, because it is interesting. Breer has Anthony Richardson, the quarterback out of Florida, falling all the way down to 19, where eventually Tampa takes him. Interestingly enough, we had some guys fall. Logan and I did our mock draft, our final one, this morning. And I will go ahead and tell you, we traded down multiple times for the Commanders. But we had like quarterbacks falling in a major way in this draft. And I think it is very possible, especially if the if the Texans do not take Stroud at 2. If the Texans, or I shouldn't say just Stroud, if they don't take Stroud or Levis or Richardson at 2, if they take one of them, then it's very possible that obviously Arizona at 3 doesn't. Indy becomes very interesting at 4. Do they take one? Do they not? But probably. But now instead of 3 or 4 quarterbacks going in the top 4, you're talking about just 2. And then there's kind of a gap in teams that could take quarterback, like Detroit at 6 could, Vegas at 7 could, Atlanta at 8 could, Chicago at 9 not going to, Philly at 10 not going to. You get to Tennessee at 11. Like, is that the place the third quarterback goes? Houston at 12 if they passed at 2? Or if they passed at 2, is it because they're just trying to build a roster and next year they know they're going to be bad and they're going to get in the Caleb Williams or Drake May sweepstakes, who are going to be the top 2 picks almost certainly in next year's draft? So Richardson falling and or Levis falling is interesting. If Levis falls, I'm really not that interested. If Richardson falls, though, whoo! I am interested in a generational talent with good character traits. He has got certainly some learning to do. It's not going to be easy. He hasn't played a ton of football. Those things are scary. However, if he puts it together, this dude's going to be sick. I do know that it's a little out over your skis to get too excited about a quarterback based off physical traits. And I do think that that's really important, right? What's the best superpower a hero can have or a quarterback can have? Their decision making. That's the thing that separates great quarterbacks apart. It's not being able to run 4.43. It's not being able to throw a ball 60 miles an hour. It's not being able to do anything else that separates Anthony Richardson apart in terms of his physical freakiness. It's not having great size. It's, can you figure out where the ball is supposed to go faster than everybody else, and can you get it there accurately in a catchable way? So that covers, your touch, and can you layer the ball, and obviously your accuracy. And to some extent, your arm strength, but doesn't have to be a rocket. It's nice. It does unlock some throws that other quarterbacks can't make. But Richardson did show some promise in some of those really important areas at Florida. And at 16, honestly, I want him to be there because I would think at that point someone else might come up and get him. If you're another team that is later in the first round that is kind of planning ahead at quarterback and you can wait a year or two, do you come up? Maybe. But I also, obviously, as many of you did who read this story, caught the last sentence of Breer's little write-up on the Commanders, where he has taking Joey Porter Jr., that Marty Herney, assistant general manager and senior advisor to Ron Rivera, apparently has been pushing for Richardson quite a bit. Now, big circle back, big deep breath. It also is important to mention that Sam Howell might have graded out better than Anthony Richardson if Sam Howell was in this year's draft. Obviously, he went to the 5th round, so a lot of teams would not have had him higher than Richardson, who some teams unquestionably have number 1 overall on their board. So there's a giant crapshoot. We talked about it yesterday with Sam Fortier. Great interview. If you missed it, 6 o'clock, hit the rewind feature for another hour, or just go back in the podcast feed or on YouTube and check it out. But like scout to scout, even within a team, there's massive disagreement. Nevertheless, consensus across the league. But I would bet that there's a lot of people in the NFL that have Sam Howell, whatever grade they had on him last year, higher than Anthony Richardson this year. And if that's the case, taking a quarterback at 16 is stupid. And that's where I really struggle, because I haven't done my own evaluations. I never pretend to. I certainly kind of collect information from people who do this for a living and do watch the tape and, what overlaps, what doesn't. This guy thinks this guy thinks that. I get opinions, but I don't sit down and I don't pretend. I don't lie to you guys. I don't watch hours and hours and hours of tape. It's just not, I wouldn't know enough. I can know some of what I'm looking at, but I'm not a scout. Much better at breaking down like game film on how a team performs than any individual player in terms of looking at college tape and trying to project it to the NFL. So without having a super strong opinion on exactly who I think Sam Howell was and is, and exactly who I think Anthony Richardson is and will be, it's impossible to know whether that's smart or not. But I do think it's worth pointing out, if the Commanders had a significantly higher grade on Richardson than they do on Howell, and they genuinely think that Richardson could be a Pro Bowl quarterback, all-pro level quarterback, and that they have the tools. Bieniemy is the guy to coach him up, and the guy they hired from Stanford is the QB coach, and like they think they can get that out of him. They should take him at 16, say sorry for all the nice things we said about Sam Howell. He's going to be an awesome backup, and go from there. And if not, then that's okay too. I'm not going to freak out one way or the other, no matter what happens at 16 in regards to Richardson being on the board. I would simply say that I hope that he is there, Because if he is there and you don't think he's that different than Hal, hopefully someone else does, and that's where one of the trade-back scenarios enters the equation for the Commanders. I still don't think Porter Jr., from everything I've read, is a scheme fit for the Commanders, yet a lot of information people keep mocking him there. So we'll see. Perhaps they do feel like they can get what they need out of him, and he does fit an athletic profile that they've typically liked at corner. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Ben Standig certainly has thoughts on the Chase Young situation, and also he's got many mock drafts. We will run through all the draft implications and Chase Young implications with Standig next on the Team 980.
With the Dan Snyder era nearly over, and NFL draft
The Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Scheduled to catch up with Ben Standig. I don't know what's he might be dealing with news or something, so we'll get him on the phone in a few minutes. I hate being wrong, but when I'm wrong, I will own it. And we just spent a whole hour really kind of with the discussion based around the fact that Chase Young's fifth-year option, $17 million, is not that different from the number I've been hearing for a long time on the franchise tag for Chase in 2023 or for next year, which is, I thought, 18 or I guess maybe it was 19 million. Well, now I guess people are doing the math more, and Nikki Javala just tweeted at me, and I saw the Over the Cap put this out as well. Apparently, the number might be 24 million. The transition tag, which is the average of the top 10 salaries, is something that has been floating out there. But that's probably unlikely. Like, no one ever uses the transition tag, although it's super intriguing. At least gives you the right of first refusal. It's kind of like restricted free agency. But if the franchise tag number is 24 million next year for Chase, not 18, 19, then that's a completely different discussion. I still don't think it was the wrong move, but it's a much more difficult discussion because the risk of him playing really well and you wanting to keep him is much, 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 much higher. Because the thought was, as far as I understood it, with the math being the math, the way I had seen it reported everywhere, is that the difference, like the downside of not giving him that option is a $1 million penalty, essentially. If it's a $7 million penalty, that's a very, very, very different penalty. And it also changes the discussion around what a new contract for him would look like. So I'm kind of, to be completely honest, as we wait on Standig, I'm kind of talking through this in real time. Probably not the best radio we've ever done. Anthony, did he text you back and we're good, or what's
Yeah, he didn't know I was calling, so I'm calling back.
Oh, so he phone was on the old do not disturb, I guess. But it is something that is a game changer in terms of the equation that you're talking about, where it's not that big of a deal if he goes out and balls out and you just got to franchise tag him next year. $24 million is a much, much, much bigger commitment and decision to make of letting a guy walk versus the franchise versus whatever it is. All right, let's get Standig in here, and we will discuss this further and see if also we can get some clarity on the number. Time for Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
All right, let's bring in from The Athletic Ben Standig. Ben, what's up, sir? How are you? Do we have Ben? Now we should have Ben. Ben, what's up, man?
Hey, what's going on? How's it going?
Oh, I'm just having my whole show wrecked because my entire take was apparently based off wrong math. So that's fun. What is the franchise tag number for? So they obviously declined the option at 18, right? Or it's 17.4. Of course, talking about Chase Young, the big story of the day, yada, yada, yada. But they declined the number at 17.4. And then the way I had seen it reported was, okay, let's say he goes out, balls out. You want to franchise tag Chase next year, it'll be around 18 or 19. Apparently that number is 24 from what I'm seeing now. What more can you tell us on kind of the calculation that's being made here?
Yeah, I think I remember initially when this all, when we started talking about all this, I think there was, I don't want to say a report, but I think somebody threw that out there. The transition tag, which is something you would never really hear used, I think that is in that sort of 17, 18 million range. So perhaps that's where things got off the rails. But yeah, it's over $24 million, about 24.5 would be the franchise tag number. And yeah, so obviously if things go well for Chase Young and he has a great year, then, and they decide, okay, we need to do the franchise tag since we declined the option, then it would cost them, roughly $7 million more towards the cap. The question is that worth not locking yourself into his guaranteed salary next year automatically and getting the opportunity to see him play this year and get a feel for there? I personally think the answer is yes, but that is the argument for one of the arguments for why they should not have declined it.
Right. The risk is that you get yourself in a sticky wicket with him and Sweat being in the same year. Ultimately, though, they're going to want to sign one of those two guys to a long-term deal probably next year anyway. What are we talking about in terms of, let's say they both have good, potentially very good years, right? Kind of years that you'd want to bring them back if you didn't, and either one of them back. Obviously, you're not going to be able to bring both back just because of the math. What kind of market do you think that they're going to have after the season next year?
Well, just looking at the edge rushers, I mean, it's going to be north of $20 million one way or the other. The exact number, it's all relative to how they perform and where the marketplace goes, similar to how we viewed Terry McLaurin last year, where we might have thought at one point, and then that market went north, and his eventual number did as well. But I mean, this is why the edge rusher is a premium position. It's the price of doing business there, and I think it's also the argument for why drafting defensive end this year is not a bad way to go. Because if there's somebody that they like, whether it's at 16 or somewhere on day 2, because now you're adding a much cheaper contract into the equation where you already are paying John Allen and Deron Payne, and presumably would pay at least Young or Sweat that kind of money. But now you would have somebody else to jump in there and give you hopefully some good production. I mean, the expectations wouldn't be the same as like the number 2 overall pick of the draft for 2020. But if you take somebody at 16 this year, you think that guy can give you a boost, and then help you somewhat this year as well. So that's the thing. It's not I see people pointing to declining to $17.5 million as looking at the top alignment. It's not a huge number, but doing so in isolation is the wrong way to look at this. It's not a matter of if Chase Young was the only defensive lineman they had essentially of note, they're picking this up, I would bet. But that's not the case. They already have 3 other guys, and they've already extended 2 of them. So relative to that, the risk isn't as worth it as if it was just Chase Young and say only John Allen and not the other 2. Well, then that's a different story.
Right. Ben Stanig is with us here on the Team 980. I mean, I think part of the criticism, too, is remember way back when the Detroit Lions drafted receivers 4 years in a row? How could anyone forget, right? And it's sure. Well, they did that because all of them sucked. Every single one of them they took was between bad and really, really bad. And then eventually they got Calvin Johnson, and that one worked out. But the Commanders kind of had the opposite if Young and Sweat turn out to have really good years, that they took multiple flyers at very important positions, or a very important position if you want to just consider D-line the position, and they all worked out. How big of a mistake is it, though, if they ultimately then get to the end of this and can't keep these guys and wind up losing one of them for only a comp pick, even if it winds up being a 3rd rounder, which is the best comp pick you can get?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, this is sort of the rub of the whole deal. I've been talking about this for over a year. Before they drafted Fedarian Mathis, my reporting or my thinking at that time was, don't be shocked if Washington drafts a defensive tackle early, because Deron Payne is heading to free agency, and it's not going to be realistic, in my view, and I think in most people's views that I've talked to extend all 4 of these players. And typically edge rushers are where you want to spend money. But then Deron Payne, did what he did. They gave him the money. And the point is that I was sort of making then is, it's what you're saying right now. At some point you have to acknowledge the longer term circumstance and try to get maximize your opportunity and your value for these players, rather than running it all the way to the end and then getting that third round compensatory pick. And really, it's start of the fourth if you want to look at it in a different way, because it's the very end of the third. Which is what they did with Brandon Scherff, of course, and Kirk Cousins. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is potentially an issue. Now, it's different than saying therefore they should have picked up Chase Young's option. I don't mean that, but at some point you need to be proactive. They have not shown that yet, and that's where potentially they do eventually get themselves into a tough spot. But I think, Chase Young, the decline of this option, I think still works in the moment. But you're right, it's possible one of these guys will walk next year, and all you get is that compensatory third.
And see, that's the thing I struggle with, Ben. Like, you're becoming my my sports take therapist here, as much as your reporting chops are influencing this and on display clearly for the audience. But it's like in the NBA, the Wizards don't trade Kyle Kuzma at the deadline. They're probably going to lose him for nothing unless he resigns here. But now the upheaval in the organization seems more likely he just walks, and you don't get anything for him. And the way the restrictive nature of the NBA cap and because they have kind of a hard cap, or I guess it's a soft cap, but you can't go over it if you have certain circumstances, blah, 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 to sign new players, basically. Like, not using that space and trading it is so much more damaging than the NFL, where if you let a guy walk, then that space is available. Like, there's no bird rights. There's no going over the cap for your own players. And you can always restructure guys, and you get compensatory picks. So I guess kind of what I'm saying is I don't think it's as nearly mortal of a sin as it is in the NBA. And I think because of what's happened here with Cousins, with Sheriff, et cetera, certainly there is a sensitivity to that. And it would be optimal if they got out ahead and said, hey, we're going to trade this guy a year ahead of time, and got draft picks that were better than a third, or if you want to look at the compensatory third at the start of the fourth round pick. But at the same time, like, it's not like they're not going to play for you this year. And if they go out and make a run to the playoffs and Young and Sweat produce, like, that also has a lot of value. And I do think, like, that element, as odd as it is, that actually playing football is the element that gets overlooked often in this. I do think that is a bit of what's happening here.
You are speaking the truth there. People ignore the actual season. Like prior to today, every time this discussion came up about declining the option, people just kept talking about, they're going to lose him, this, that, and the other. I'm like, he's still on the team. He's still going to play this year. They can still figure something out after the year, just like they did with Deron Payne. I mean, literally, they just had a lineman who they didn't negotiate with. He goes out, has a Pro Bowl season, and then they figured out a way to keep him. Again, we can debate should they have done it earlier, would they have saved him some money, whatever, but that did just happen, and he had a really good year. And now if it looks like they're going to have the four of these guys on the field at the same time, for the first time since 2021. I think it's reasonable to say that John Allen has continued to improve. Deron Payne certainly improved last year. Montez Sweat's coming off a good year. If Chase Young, has a year, let's just say even comparable to what he did as a rookie, well, how much better is this line going to be? And that's the thing. You can't just discount what happens this coming year. That's not even factoring in that for Ron Rivera, this next year might be everything. If he doesn't have a winning season and maybe more, he may not have any chance of keeping his job with new ownership. So you can't just ignore what is going to happen this year. And again, if Chase Young balls out to the point that everybody screams, bloody murder over declining the option, well, then Washington probably had a pretty good year. So that's not the worst thing either.
Right. And if for some reason he's having a monster year and they stink by the trade deadline, then we can have that discussion. But if he's good, I see it hard to, I find it hard to believe that he's going to be good and they're going to be bad. So it seems like a relevant piece of information. All right. Ben Standing with us, of course, from The Athletic here on the Team 980. Switch gears, talk NFL draft. You did the mock last week with 6 different scenarios. Which one was your favorite?
I mean, trading down is always fun, right?
I've done it so much.
Yeah. And I think for Washington, they're obviously, there are players that they're eyeing at 16, and, some of them may be there and they'll be happy with that. But, I think there's a world where the top 4 offensive linemen are gone. And I think the cornerbacks that you're looking at in the 16 range are probably not much different than they are in the 20 to 22 range. So if you could slip down, if a team wants to move up, maybe there's a quarterback that slips, maybe there's an edge rusher. Washington decides they don't think they need one right now. Then, I think that could be a pretty good deal. So, where they end up, in almost any logical scenario I would offer, it would be the coming up with a offensive lineman and a cornerback / defensive back with like their first 2 picks. So whatever scenario that works out, I think makes the most sense. I just, it's hard to see, the pure best player available one with like Bijan Robinson. Super fun to talk about. And it would be interesting to see him here because he would probably be their best running back. But to me, that's probably just a bit unrealistic, and I don't even know if he'll be there. So, I think, if they can move down a little bit and still get probably, one of these cornerbacks and then get offensive line help in the second round while adding another pick or 2, I think that would be a pretty good way to go.
I agree. Here's the question I've come across when I've done the mocks over the last week or so that I've been playing with a lot of the simulators. Logan and I did one this morning. We did ultimately trade down. But who is the ideal partner to trade with, both in where the kind of sweet spot is to land in terms of what you'll get back and still being able to get the players you want, and who is actually going to be looking to trade up and for what player? Because that's the other part, too, is you get to the point where you're like, well, I don't really like anybody. Let me trade down. And you go to look at who's available and who might want to trade up for them, and there's not really any matches. And that could become a problem, too, where you're just kind of stuck picking someone because there's no one that wants to come up. So kind of who are the players that Washington should be rooting for to fall that someone else might be targeting, and who is that someone else?
Yeah, so I would say you can look at Seattle. Seattle has 10 picks in this draft. They don't have a history of trading up, and they also have the 5th pick in this draft, so they already have plenty of surplus in the first round. That said, if they go with, say, a Jalen Carter, the defensive tackle from Georgia, at 5, they still may want an edge rusher. They may be a team interested in quarterback. And, I'm sure you've talked plenty about, the whole deal with Washington and why they still don't seem likely to take one. That could be a team that would move up. And if you go to 20, you still stay ahead of the Ravens and the Vikings for a cornerback. So I think that's something to consider. Tampa Bay at 19. Now, we're saying Washington would want an offensive tackle. And that's, of course, accurate. And I mentioned the top 4 guys are probably going to be gone, could be gone, I should say. The 5th tackle is probably Anton Harrison from Oklahoma. I think he's probably a little bit later in round 1, but the Steelers at 17 are known to be wanting to find a way to get a tackle themselves. Tampa Bay also needs one, so Tampa Bay perhaps jumps ahead of Pittsburgh to grab that tackle. That's presumably that Washington would say that's fine, that they see the value of getting an offensive lineman later. I think that's something. And then, I mentioned quarterback. Minnesota at 23, I don't know if I really see them being a team to make a move up. They only have 5 draft picks, and regardless of this being Kirk Cousins' last year of his contract and the idea that they want a future quarterback, it seems more likely they would go the other direction. But if there's a few that Hendon Hooker, who would be the 5th quarterback most likely, goes before 23 and they really want him, people do crazy things for quarterbacks. So that would be another one to consider. But you're right, there's not like a ton of obvious players that would people would be excited about. I'll also mention the edge rushers, Lucas Van Ness from Iowa, Miles Murphy from Clemson. They're guys that, for teams that want that position, that could be something tempting as well.
Ben Standing with The Athletic with us for just a few more minutes here on the Hoffman Show. So you do a mock draft every year that you then submit, and then it routinely wins most accurate mock draft. Is that one out yet, or does that come out tomorrow morning?
Not out yet. Still messing around with it. But yeah, I'm just going to drive myself crazy. But yeah, I'll probably post that around sometime late tonight. On Twitter. We'll put it up there and let everybody take a whack at it.
Have you decided who the Commanders are going to pick yet, or is that part of what you're still messing with?
Yeah, that's part of what I'm messing with, because I think there's a few potential tipping points in the top 15 picks that could determine whether it's on some level, it's like if Jackson Smith and Jigba, the receiver from Ohio State, goes somewhere, whether it's Green Bay at 13 or Houston at 12, then that probably can push one of the offensive linemen down. But if he doesn't go and Green Bay takes an offensive lineman, now all of a sudden the lineman may go up. And, there's been rumors or buzz about the Cardinals at 3 possibly taking Paris Johnson, the left tackle from Ohio State. If that were to happen, the offensive lineman run could start a lot earlier, because previously the standard deal had been starting at the 9th pick with the Bears. So that's the part that's sort of tricky, because if now all of a sudden those linemen are gone, now what are you doing? You're taking the best player available, could be an edge rusher, which is, they might need, could be Bijan Robinson. Cornerback, like I said, I just feel like Emmanuel Forbes is his name, I think, to keep an eye on for Washington. But I don't think you have to use the 16th pick to get him. But now, like you said before, can you find a team to trade down? So that's the sort of the dilemma is for me, like the offensive linemen. When do they go off the board, and what happens if the top 4 guys are gone before Washington picks?
Right. Okay, so last thing I'll ask you on the way out. You talk to agents, you talk to a ton of people this time of year. What's your favorite rumor that you've heard? It doesn't have to be remotely true. It's just like, I can't believe someone just told me that.
Well, some of the Will Levis stuff, just in general. Obviously this has been just an unbelievably wacky deal that Reddit or gambling, is like altering lines. And, to go from he was getting like slandered almost a week or 2 ago as a quarterback to now possibly being a top 4 pick, it's just sort of some people buy it, but others are just like incredulous that this is where we're at. And, I enjoy this stuff, but the rumor mill can set you your hair on fire because it is so crazy. But, I think the Levis stuff is just so all over the place. He could go 4, he could go in the 20s, and it is hard to wrap your brain around that.
John McClain, who's been reporting on the Houston football since the Oilers days, thinks they're taking Levis at 2. So who knows? It is silly season, but it ends tomorrow, Ben. It ends tomorrow, and the silliness becomes not the rumors, but the draft itself. Ben Standig, read his work in The Athletic. Always appreciate him weekly here on the show. Good luck with your final draft. I'm sure Twitter will be very, very nice to it. It always is.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure hearing from Twitter. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
All right, you got it. Ben Standig, everybody, with us here on the Hoffman Show. When we get back, we go to the place that we probably shouldn't. We break some rules. We dive into the comments section. Never read the comments. We do it every Wednesday here on the Hoffman Show, and we do it next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube right now. YouTube.com/@theteam980. Let's see. Hey, we got some folks watching on YouTube. What's up? Hello, YouTube people. Hello. Good day to you. Make sure you subscribe to the Team 980's YouTube channel for all of our on-demand content. We do try to publish clips there each and every day. So if you missed something, might go back, best of the show. That's a good way to do it. Consume it, watch it. I also have my YouTube page, youtube.com/@CraigHoffman, where we also post lots of content, interviews, etc. And then you guys leave comments. And then what do we do, Anthony? Because they tell us, don't read the comments. It's the place that's just very nasty, and it's just not good for you. But I guess we don't listen.
We don't, Craig, and I think we do a little something like we read those comments, baby.
Yeah. Yeah, that was. I think you nailed it. I think you did. I think you crushed it this week.
Thank you.
We had the Price is Right kind of reading a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I think this is probably a good one. Tell you what, let's do this. Let's go through some of the Team 980 comments first, and then I'll go through some of mine as well. So, talking about C.J. Stroud, what are NFL coaches really saying about C.J. Stroud and Anthony Richardson? That is what we had or kind of discussed with Bruce Feldman from The Athletic, their college football national insider. And someone commented about Stroud wasn't hitting his receivers in the shoelaces. His ball placement is elite. It's easy to be elite when you throw to open guys all the time because they're so much better than everyone they're playing against. And by the way, you're also throwing from clean pockets. So if I were to tell you, hey, you've got to stand 10 yards from me and throw me a football and hit me in the chest, if you just do that on repeat, that's very different in terms of elite ball placement than, hey, I'm going to stand 10 yards away from you. You have to throw the ball to me and hit me right here in the hands, but Anthony's going to tackle you every time. Let's see if your accuracy is as good. Well, now you have to do that same thing. Anthony's going to try to tackle you every time, and Danny's going to run down the hall and from Grant and Danny's studio, and he's going to try to bat the ball down. Like, we're talking about different tasks here, and the NFL is the latter one, right? Clearly, Danny Rouillet is playing defensive back in the NFL. No, he's definitely not. But when you have Marvin Harrison Jr., who's a top 5 pick probably in next year's draft, when you have Jackson Smith and Jigba, who's probably a top 15 pick in this year's draft, when you have Chris Olave, who was a top 15 pick in last year's draft, and those are the receivers you're throwing to, you should have exceptional ball placement. That doesn't mean that C.J. Stroud isn't good, but I do think there are real concerns there because you haven't seen him tested in the ways that other quarterbacks are tested in college, and as a result, it makes the evaluation hard. It doesn't mean that he's bad. It just means that it's really hard to tell how good he actually is because he's put up these monster numbers and played really well in a set of circumstances that much lesser players that are, for instance, to use the example Bruce used, Bruce was taking from one of the coaches that he interviewed for his piece, like Aiden O'Connell out of Purdue, who's a later round pick in this draft, probably also throws 40 touchdowns for Ohio State last year. Any moderately good pro prospect throws for 40-plus touchdowns. They don't do some of the stuff in the Georgia game Stroud did, and I think that probably helps him a lot. I watched C.J. Stroud in that Georgia game and was blown away. So impressed. And he's got a lot going for him. But I also understand the concerns and the questions of his ability to do it over time consistently. Let's see. It's hard to believe, Anthony, but it's been less than a week since Tommy Shepard was fired.
Ooh.
So we got some comments on the reaction that we had. The show, that was such a funny day for us, by the way.
Was that last Wednesday?
It was last Wednesday. It was a week ago today. So Anthony was Well, you had to work that night.
Yeah, I had to.
So like the news breaks at 6:52. We see it at 6:56 when we turn off our microphones, and then we're just running around with the chickens like chickens with their head cut off, being like, we got to stay on the air. But Anthony couldn't stay on the air. He had to go. So because then the other thing was you left the next day. Not only did you have to go that night, you were out Thursday, Friday because you went to Vegas for the fight.
Yep.
Do you know what happened?
Well, I know Tommy got fired.
Well, no, I'm saying here.
Oh,
do you know who filled in for you?
Oh, yeah, CK.
Yeah, CK, our boss. You know the last time he had run a board?
Probably like 20, 25 years ago.
You better hope he didn't hear that.
All right, maybe 15.
13 and a half years ago.
13.
I didn't know that till after he was done, and that's a good thing because that means he did a great job, and I never had any questions.
Yep.
But that was a wild, wild day. And got some comments on it. G Love says the point is not whether or not Rui is great. He's a better basketball player than both Kispert and Denny Avia, and you let him go in favor of them, which lets me know the organization doesn't have the eye for talent. Plus, Rui is still young and growing. Did you hear what the Lakers coach has said about Rui? He said Rui was the biggest surprise out of all their player acquisitions. Andre tacks on, and they let him go for Kendrick Nunn. I mean, WTF. Look, Rui Hachimura is having a very, very nice series in L.A. Rui Hachimura is set up to succeed in L.A. in a way that he never was going to succeed here. I'm sorry, it's just true. Anthony, if you had an NBA career on the line, who would you rather play with? Bradley Beal, 3 out of every 5 games. Kristaps Porzingis, 4 out of every 5 games. Kyle Kuzma, 4 out of every 5 games. Some combination of that. Or LeBron James and Anthony Davis, 5 out of 5 nights. I guess Davis is more of a 4 out of 5 kind of guy.
Yeah.
But LeBron and AD.
LeBron and AD.
Yeah. Of course Rui's having a better time in LA. He hasn't actually changed as a player. You know how many assists he has in the entire series? It might be 0. Rui Hachimura stats. For the entire, and he's having a great series. His job is to come in off the bench and score, which is the exact role that he is suited for. Because onto the season, he's averaging 0.9 assists per game. In the playoffs, he is averaging 1 assist per game, 5.5 rebounds. Now, he's averaging 18 points. That's great. That is a much higher number than he was obviously averaging during the regular season, where he averaged 11.2 this season. He's averaging 12.5 over his career. He's shooting lights out. He's shooting 62%. This is an example of small sample sizes. Rui is not going to shoot 62% for the rest of his career, and if that number comes down to even 40, he's no longer averaging 18 points a game. So he's also still not a very good defender. He doesn't add, he's not a prolific rebounder, so he doesn't add you a ton in that space. And, you know, he's open for a reason, even if that might be bad in the short term for Memphis. Teams don't trust him to make threes against them. He just has, which is great. I'm not trying to poo-poo on Rui in terms of what he's done. What he's done in this series with Memphis is fantastic and very well may have contributed to Tommy Shepard getting fired. But he's also 25 years old, and he was due a new contract. And I don't know when fans are going to finally come around to the fact that so many of these decisions that get made are financial. Re-signing Rui to a big money deal would have been a mistake for the Washington Wizards. And because of that, getting something for him was necessary. It also would not surprise me if Rui wanted to go to L.A. Like, he's from Japan. The Asian, population, obviously, there's like nice support here in D.C., but it's a whole different ballgame on the West Coast. He probably has a much better support system on the West Coast and access, obviously, to going home and for his family to come visit and all that kind of stuff. He went to college on the West Coast of the U.S. at Gonzaga, the whole deal. He wanted to be in L.A., would be my guess. And so if that's the case, you're kind of stuck. And, long term, was it feasible to have him and Denny here? No. Denny's not due a new contract yet. He's also 21. And his numbers are better than Rui's this year in almost every category. So I know it's frustrating, but I actually, on the list of sins from Tommy Shepard, Rui is an easy one to point out, but I don't think that I actually don't think that was that much of one. I'm still not convinced he's awesome now. And if he is, okay, they have a player development problem in Washington then. And Tommy needed to go because of that. And that's been a problem since the Ernie Grunfeld administration, which Tommy was also a part of. So if that's the case, like, goodbye, see ya. Player development is you need to reform that, and that starts at the GM spot. But that doesn't really, that doesn't mean that if they had just waited on Rui, even though he had 30 points in his final game here, that he was actually awesome the whole time. I think that's silly. Philip commented, this organization needs a complete tear down and rebuild. It operates on a scarcity mindset, and the scouting can be described as lazy at best. Shepard was no different than Grunfeld, who was no different than the late Wes Unseld, R.I.P. Calling the scouting lazy, I think, is frankly lazy. Because these guys work really hard. You can work really hard and still be bad at something that's really difficult. Scouting NBA players is extremely difficult. And so I would not call it lazy. I would call it poor. And I think, to go back to what I said in the last segment, Anthony, or the last comment, I don't know how much of this is a scouting problem. As you watch, Troy Brown play pretty well for the Lakers, Rui play pretty well for the Lakers. Obviously Otto was a big part of what the Warriors did last year. He's battled some injuries this year, obviously, but he played well in other places. You watch the guys leave here and get better, and you go, okay, well, is that just coaching, or is that a player development issue where the players are not brought along from both a skill and a mentality standpoint in a way that allows them to perform when they get on the court? That's obviously some level of coaching. But when you see it go across multiple administrations coaching-wise, it was a problem under Brooks. It's been a problem under Unseld. It was a problem under guys before that, Randy Whitman, etc. And you see it across, multiple GMs now. I tend to think that this is an organizational level problem, and how they're designed, how they're built, and who's in charge of that element. And hopefully whoever the new GM/team president is has a lot more control over that. Let's see. Okay, that's the comments from the Team 980 page. You can, of course, read those on youtube.com, or comment at youtube.com/@theteam980. As for some on my page, just real quick tack on, Will Dawkins from Oklahoma City. Yusuf says in our chat with Chris Miles yesterday, talking about who could be next for the Wizards, he's a name that's super intriguing. He's their assistant GM. I am definitely interested in the Oklahoma City tree. Yes, the Menace commented on, we did a segment yesterday that was typically our what else happened this weekend. It's pretty fun, lighthearted, but I actually had a point yesterday. We're talking about what Josh Harris, who's obviously been a very successful sports owner, can learn from Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, who took over a Fifth Flight soccer club in Wales, part of the English system, and they just won promotion, and the town loves them, and just the civic pride and everything was very, very cool. If you haven't watched Welcome to Wrexham, you're welcome again. FX for the free plug. It's awesome. But he goes, hearing Deadpool talk about the defensive record of Boren Wood in the National League feels like a fever dream still. Yeah, it's definitely out of place. I didn't think Ryan Reynolds would be doing post-game interviews on Welsh soccer, giving defensive stats, but not the point of the video, but pretty funny nonetheless. Then, Anthony, did you see the mock draft that Logan and I did on the mock draft scenarios that Logan and I did on Take Command?
Nah, I haven't seen those.
Okay, so we pulled up we kind of did a version of it on this show. And we had ESPN's mock draft simulator, and we did 3 different 3-round simulations where we let the simulator pick for every other team, and then we picked for the Commanders. Well, in one draft, the middle of the 3 that we did, Will Levis slid to 16. So we were like, well, shoot, let's trade out. someone's got to come up and want Levis. I think we traded down to like 23 to the Vikings. Well, we anticipated when that happened that the team that we traded with, I can't remember if there was Tampa or Minnesota, but whoever we traded down with would then take Levis. They did not. He slid down to, let's say we traded with the Vikings at 23. And then we were like, okay, Levis is still on the board at 23. Maybe the Saints will want Will Levis. They just had Carr, but like, do they want to try to bring in a young guy? Let's trade down with the Saints at 30. And maybe they'll take Will Levis. They accepted our trade. It did not take Will Levis. Will Levis on the board at 30. We're like, well, shoot, do we just take him now? It's like, nah, can't remember who we took. Someone good was on the board. But at that point, we had made 3 trades, and we had a ton of picks, right? Draft again. Levis is still on the board. Draft again. Levis is still on the board. Now we're in the 3rd round. Levis is still on the board. And I think by the time we got to the Commanders' pick at 97, which is the current 3rd rounder that they have, which is a compensatory pick for losing Sheriff, we finally just said, oh my God, somehow Will Levis is still on the board. We have to take Will Levis. And so we took Will Levis for the Commanders, not at 16, but at 97.
Would this be equivalent to the Sam Howell to an extent? A guy falling that far.
Kinda. That
had a 1st-round grade. Like, that's a steal.
You just, at that point, you're just like, what? I guess we have to take him, because at that point, like, there's no way anyone else on your board is close to the grade you had on him.
Mm-hmm.
Unless everyone thinks that he actually stinks. But Sky Buddy says, the Will Levis slide was nuts, which 100% true. We were flabbergasted. We just felt obliged. We're like, okay, if no one else will end this young man's slide, we will end the Will Levis slide. We will take Will Levis. It's crazy.
That would be crazy.
It's crazy. Phil says, if Dalton Kincaid is there, take him. He's a tier 1 guy. This draft is all about Sam Howell. Next obvious choice is O-line. I'll say this one more time before the draft, or I don't know, maybe I'll wind up saying it tomorrow, but I hate the idea of taking tight end in the 1st round for 2 reasons. One, what you're ultimately looking for in tight ends is traits, and while Dalton Kincaid's got a lot of great ones, so do the 4 guys that the Commanders have. Logan Thomas is big, strong, and fast. Cole Turner is enormous and fast. Curtis Hodges, enormous. And then Armani Rogers is like enormous, tall, fast, quick, elusive. Like, he's a freak of an athlete. And so if all you're going to do is draft another guy that's kind of in the same mold, why? I tend to believe that with Bieniemy here, one of those or 2 of those or 3 of those guys, and I didn't even mention John Bates, who's kind of in a different mold, but like is a blocking tight end, that one of those other guys is going to pan out. Now, if you wind up taking a guy like Sam Laporta in the 2nd round because he's easily the best player on your board, or in the 3rd round, then fine. I'm willing to take a tight end. I just think that with a 1st round pick, that's not a very smart usage of it. And to back that up, there are a ton of tight ends, guys like Sam Laporta, guys like Luke Musgrave, who are available in the 2nd and 3rd rounds of this draft that are starting caliber tight ends that are just going to fall because of positional value and thus are worth taking later, and that might even be better fit skill set-wise for Washington. Logan has 11 starting grade tight ends in this draft. Taking one first seems very, very silly. And then last but not least, circling back real quick, there's one more I wanted to get to from Wiz Fan. Circling back to the Tommy Shepard / Bradley Beal discussion. Obviously, those 2 things merged. We obviously talked a lot last week about what's next for Beal, Kuzma, and Porzingis after the Wizards fired Tommy. And Wiz Fan said, Craig, I know you're a trainer. Do you feel Bradley Beal was in good shape this season? He looked like Carmelo at the end, in my humble opinion, and that is not what we need to see after we just gave you a max deal. I would trade Brad for Maxey or another younger ascending player. That may not be the focal point of getting many minutes on their team. Connolly lost me because of the Gobert trade. Masai should be the number 1 option. I think the GM has to hold everyone accountable. That includes Wes, who still hasn't created an identity with this team the way a guy like Taylor Jenkins in Memphis has. They are tough and play hard. A couple things I wanted to get to in this real quick. First and foremost, it's impossible to look at any human being and tell what kind of shape they're in. Fitness is not related to how someone looks. It's just not. There are athletes of all sizes that do incredible things that would blow your mind based off stereotypes all the time. So looking especially at a pro basketball player who looks like a pro basketball player and being like, that guy's fit or not, is not something I will do, and it's not something you should do. That said, you look at the hamstring injuries that Brad dealt with this year, and clearly his training was off, and he said it at the end of the year. He's like, my training in the offseason was hampered by the wrist issue, and I wasn't available as much as I needed to be, and that's on me. So he owned that to an extent, but I also have serious questions about then what was the plan and how was it executed? Because that, as a trainer, that shouldn't happen. You shouldn't have the kinds of issues that he had this year, soft tissue, muscle stuff, when he has spent so much time in the years past getting through some of that stuff and coming up with a good plan. You've got to be able to adapt. It can't be only in perfect circumstances. And whether you're working with the organization to build up your minutes over time, you delay your comeback so that when you're actually back, you're back, or just being more diligent and disciplined to not go in and out of the lineup so much. Like they screwed up this year. And I'm not prescribing that to a desire to screw up. Like I'm not saying he didn't care. Oh, I got paid, I don't care. It's just with the benefit of hindsight, that was not good. Really bad. The Connolly thing, I want to know more about the Gobert trade, but I tend to think he's probably going to wind up being the best option. I don't think Masai is realistically an option. Especially after they fire Nick Nurse, like he's not leaving Toronto. But I do think the biggest thing that has to happen moving forward is they do need to get a vision for the franchise. And that is something that the Wiz fan mentioned in here that I've heard consistently from people who cover the team, people involved in the team, et cetera, over the past week since Tommy got fired. About a week ago, minus an hour or plus an hour. But they do need to kind of figure out that identity. What does it mean to be a Washington Wizard, and what does it mean for the Wizards to play basketball? How does that look? No matter who is in the lineup. Corey Kispert nailed that in his post-season press conference at the end of the year. All right, that's Never Read the Comments. Some Wizards, some Commanders, some NFL Draft, all kinds of good stuff. You want to leave a comment, make sure you hit us. YouTube.com/@CraigHoffman, YouTube.com/@TheTeam980. And, of course, if you're watching this back later on YouTube, make sure you hit like and subscribe to the channel that you are watching on. All right, when we get back, my old buddy Landry Locker worked together for a long time in Dallas. Landry now hosts in Houston, and they kind of hold the keys to the entire NFL draft. So we'll talk to Landry about Houston's plans next on The Hoffman Show on the Team 980, and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live as well on YouTube, youtube.com/@theteam980. Right now, great to welcome back to the show an old friend, my guy Landry Locker, Sports Radio 610 down in Houston. We used to work together in Dallas, but he's been in Houston for quite a while now. And Landry, I wanted to have you on because obviously the Texans hold the key to this draft. Everyone thinks that Carolina's going to go Bryce Young at 1. How many different players do you feel like you've talked about for the Texans at 2 over the last 4 months getting ready for tomorrow?
Oh, my goodness. Probably 8, maybe 8, and been able to narrow it down a little bit. It's gotten so crazy at this point to where we had a 12-year NFL vet, Wade Smith, on, and he's selling Bijan Robinson at 2 now. So it's getting about as crazy as it can get. We've gotten cabin fever, but the fan base has been through a lot, and the media has been through a lot. I mean, you think that you have Bryce Young, in your grasp, and then you end up beating the Indianapolis Colts. A lot of fans, we're kind of got a little bit of PTSD from that. I think it would be like your audience rooting for the Cowboys to win a game for the better good, and then you sell your soul and you don't even finish the job, and then all of a sudden you get a new coach, and now there's just all this uncertainty. So it's been a lot, but, I mean, realistically heading into tomorrow, probably 4 or 5 guys we've narrowed it down to where you say, okay, maybe it could be this guy.
That's still so many when you pretty much know that you're on the clock. How much has the Caleb Williams talk lingered over all of this, and how real do you think it is that Houston might just say, yeah, we could take a quarterback at either 2 or 12, by the way, because they, of course, as you well know, have 2 picks in the top 12 of this draft. But we could also just take 2 other really good football players. No, we're probably not going to be very good this year anyway. And if we actually get the number 1 pick next year, we could get a generational talent.
I think you can compare it, and I think you can actually localize it with your audience to where you can kind of make it make sense for both of our audiences. It's not even necessarily Caleb. It's just the draft as a whole next year with quarterbacks. There's evidence of D'Amico Ryans being a part of an organization where they were willing to wait an extra year. And it was 2017 when Kyle Shanahan took over. D'Amico Ryans and the offensive coordinator here, Bobby Slowick, had just started their coaching careers with Kyle Shanahan, and the 49ers, like the Texans, were coming off 2 straight one-and-done coaches. They were a very scrutinized organization. They'd had it come tumbling down badly with Harbaugh, much like it did here with Bill O'Brien. And Kyle Shanahan, with the 2nd pick in the draft, just like the Texans, he decided he was going to wait a year for Kirk Cousins because he knew Kirk Cousins. And they ended up passing on Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes, who ended up going 10. And they traded back 1 spot and they drafted Solomon Thomas. And the reason why I think it's kind of relevant is because D'Amico Ryans was a part of that experience, and Kyle Shanahan was openly talking about waiting a year for Kirk Cousins. They ended up trading for Garoppolo, and it kind of didn't. The plan didn't go according to plan. But he was a part of a regime where they were willing to wait a year, and he was also a part of 4 years later where you trade up to 3 and you're going to take a quarterback no matter what. So he's been in both of those situations, and that's why I could easily see D'Amico Ryans, because of his upbringing, his coach upbringing, being willing to wait, a year to get the quarterback that he likes instead of settling.
Landry Locker in the loop middays on Sports Radio 610 in Houston, a fine Odyssey station you can listen to anytime, anywhere, live on the free Odyssey app. So, Landry, you said 5 or so players that are realistically options for the Texans at 2. Do you have one you personally want them to go with?
See, I want them to trade back. I'm in the trade back camp. But if they're gonna go defense, I can go. I'm more of a Will Anderson guy than a Tyree Wilson guy. I know that Tyree has the upside. I know people love the wingspan. I'm more of a Will Anderson guy if they're going to go defense. But I would love to see a trade back, whether it's just a couple of spots or whatever, to where maybe you could get either one of those edge guys. But if they're just going to make the pick, Will Anderson would be the guy that I would go with.
So that's who we did our podcast this morning, and we did our final mock draft. And Anderson was the guy we took for Houston. And part of my calculation is Logan, my co-host, put it on me to ultimately make the final call, was he's a kind of a character, culture type of guy. While the upside may not be quite as good, although I saw my guy Mike Renner from Pro Football Focus saying, like, I don't see why the upside for Will Anderson can't be everything Tyree Wilson is. But we know Anderson, and kind of coming out of the Alabama culture and who's a leader down there, could be a really good first draft pick for DeMeco Ryans. You obviously know the scene in Houston and kind of what's already existing there. So is that the kind of thing that they need, where that could be a really good tiebreaker for DeMeco in his first draft? Or do they have good leadership in place already that just needs more talent?
Yeah, absolutely. And I heard James Palmer of NFL Network, who used to work out here in Houston, say, it would basically be like DeMeco Ryans drafting DeMeco Ryans, because they're both from Alabama, both very high character guys, a lot of upside. So yeah, I could easily see that being the tiebreaker. The character, they need as much leadership as possible here. I mean, they really don't have anyone that the players gravitate to in the locker room. So I think that would be a tiebreaker. And when I heard Palmer put it that way, I thought it was pretty well put. I could very much see that. The other thing about drafting Tyree Wilson, and I don't want to act like it's like a major concern, but I mean, this would be the second time in as many years they draft someone in the top 3 with injury issues, which I know that sometimes it works out that way, but they drafted Stingley last year, and then you're telling me the year after that, and Stingley missed some games last year. I think some of it was caution, but he did miss 9 games. It would be the second straight year that you drafted someone in the top 3 with injury issues, and that just seems like a really, really difficult, dangerous thing to do.
Yeah, definitely, and especially with Wilson, because he was kind of a one-year wonder. Like, he stayed healthy once, he was good, and other than that, it was injuries and not a lot of production, as you well know as a Texas Tech guy. All right, Landry Locker, 610 Sports, with us here on the Hoffman Show. So if they don't go quarterback at 2, do you think that they are either trying to trade back up from 12 or hoping that, like, Levis or Richardson falls? Like, what is the quarterback plan if they don't go quarterback at 2?
I don't think that they're going to be desperate to get a quarterback if they don't take one at 2. And I could see a scenario where they pass on Richardson twice. I think if they felt good about any of these guys, if they don't feel good at them at 2, I don't think they're going to reach for them at 12. I actually think that we could see a situation where they're taking someone day 2 or day 3 at quarterback, and they're going a little bit deeper in the sticks. But I don't think they're going to try to make up for not taking a quarterback at 2. By trading up at all. I don't see that to be the case. I know people have talked about, could they get back into the first round and take Hendon Hooker? I don't think that is what they're going to do. I think if they don't take a quarterback, and like I keep bringing up the Shanahan thing, I think C.J. Bedford and Brian Hoyer were his quarterbacks. When he went quarterbackless in his first draft, I don't think they're going to try. I don't think they're going to feel too much urgency to try to make up for that and get a quarterback. I just think you see them go quarterbackless, and then we start wondering, oh my God, is Mills Mania back for another year? And are we going to be talking about like a Davis Mills, Case Keenum quarterback competition heading into camp? Which, yeah,
you don't want that ratings bonanza.
Yeah, that's a tough sell, man. I'm not sure if the promo guy is really going to be able to put something together there with the Keenum versus Mills bonanza.
I have faith in you. I've heard you create controversy out of less, but that's because I worked with you for a long time. Landry Locker with us, Sports Radio 610 in Houston. All right, final thing. What is your prediction for what actually happens at 2? What do you think, whether it's trade down, whether it's a player, not what you want to happen, what you think will?
I think there's going to be a trade back somewhere within the top 10, right there on the edge, and I think they end up with one of the edge guys that we previously mentioned. If they stay put, I think Will Anderson's going to be the pick.
I love it. That sounds very logical. Although I think people are going to freak out if they do not take Stroud.
No doubt.
We'll have fun with that. Good to talk to you, man. Appreciate your time.
All right, brother. Appreciate you.
Landry Locker, everybody, with us. Sports Radio 610, our Odyssey sister station down in Houston. If you want to listen to his show and hear everyone freaking out, it's 11 to 3 Eastern Time, 10 to 2 Central, each and every day on Sports Radio 610, which, again, you can find just by searching for it in the free Odyssey app. All right, when we get back, let's circle back to our top story here in D.C. Chase Young has his option declined. What do we make of it? We'll revisit everything around it next on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always alive as well on the free Odyssey app. Back to our top story, if you will. The Commanders have declined the fifth-year option on Chase Young, a $17.45 million contract for next year, which is a really important point. Chase Young is going to be on the Washington Commanders in 2023. That was always going to be the case. And I do think that when we talk about these things, the difference in how we talk about, for instance, some of the NBA stuff versus the NFL stuff, I want to get into. But when you talk about trading a player a year early, their production still counts for you in the year that you keep them, if you ultimately do choose to keep them. And for a team that is trying to ascend and make the playoffs, and for a coach that's trying to keep his job, they're going to want to keep Chase Young and see what he is. There's also the reality that Chase Young's trade value is lower than it has ever been. So why would you trade him now for people that want to make that argument? Hopefully you can wait and continue to have his value rise. And then, if he's good enough that you want to keep him, then you have those discussions a year from now. But realistically, there is a massive downside potential here. And that is what today is about. Today is not about all the what ifs on trades. What if he's great? What if? Today is about what if he's bad? And what you don't want to be doing is spending $17.4 million on a player that you don't want to be spending any money on because you just wish you let him walk. And that ultimately is what the Commanders prevented themselves from doing today. Now, there is a risk involved in this decision. If you want to franchise tag him next year, we've got the number cleaned up now. It is $24 or just over $24 million to franchise tag him. But if you want to keep him, the chances are you're going to want to keep him on a long-term deal. I see Montez as the guy who you might mess around franchise year with more than I do Chase. And honestly, if Chase is great, but you're not ready to commit to him long-term, then, you can't franchise both him and Montez. You probably wind up letting Sweat walk. He signs a big deal. You get a third-round compensatory pick for him. Could you get a second maybe if you trade for him? If you trade him now? Sure. But you get an extra year of production from Montez, and then you let him walk and you take that pick. So, fine. But if you want to have another prove-it year for Chase, and he's really played at an elite level, 24 actually isn't even that expensive by the time next year rolls around and a couple more guys get extensions for a top-flight defensive end. And so, for Chase Young, the best scenario is he goes out, balls out, and gets a long-term deal. That first-year number can be obviously brought down with the way the contract is structured, and then you can continue building your team next year, hopefully around Sam Howell and his continued rookie salary. By the time you have to sign Howell, guys like Allen are up. Obviously, Curtis Samuel comes off the books, et cetera, et cetera. Kendall Fuller's off the books next year, and you got 2 more years till you got to even mess with Howell. So, point is, while it is a risk, kind of a let's call it a $7.5 or a $7 million risk, right? Going from roughly $17 million to roughly $24 million next year, if you franchise versus if you had exercised the option. It's a risk worth taking because the potential downside is a $17 million risk. That you have $17 cash and cap being the more important one for purposes of this discussion. I don't really care about Josh Harris's money other than how it builds the football team. You've got that cap space tied up in a year where you are going to have to make some big decisions and potentially make some free agent splashes. One, you're going to want to re-sign either Sweat or Young, likely. And now you have the option to do either. And 2, Kendall Fuller, free agent. You obviously are hopefully going to have a deal done before then with Cam Curl in May or June of this year when you kind of get to that second wave extension season, post-draft, everyone's signed. You got to have a better idea of your cap moving forward, all that kind of stuff. But Cam Curl is also up. And then you're going to have to replace Curtis Samuel likely, unless you re-sign him for a lot less money. But even that is going to cost you money. And so wide receiver, expensive, unless you get the draft, go draft. The offensive line, I think, is still a major question. And you've got some guys that you're going to want to sign potentially next offseason. And then, you start to talk about other players that are starting to be extension eligible. Do you want to extend Jamin Davis? I know that sounds crazy, but after year 3, you have those types of discussions. You have to make a decision on his fifth-year option eventually. Like there's a lot of things that ultimately, in short and longer term, obviously a Davis fifth-year option's a couple years off, but short and long term, that a $17 million number next year could mess you up for. And so while it's not a no-brainer, it's not nothing, it just is the unfortunate reality of two things coming together for Chase. One, Chase Young made the Pro Bowl as a rookie, which is great for him, but it means that this option next year, I guess it's really bad for the Commanders, not necessarily bad for Chase, but because he made the Pro Bowl, his number is higher, where it would be $13 million if he didn't. So that's thing one. Thing two, he got hurt. And whether it's concerns about the injury or concerns about his lack of production and an inability to prove that he actually has nothing to worry about because he was injured, you just can't give a guy $17 million when he hasn't earned it yet. And I know that you get into all these hypotheticals of like, well, what if he balls out? What if he does this? Then you are going to have to pay him anyway. And if, let's say has a 20-sack year and the Commanders' defense is a championship-level defense, they finish in the top 3 and drive this team somehow to an NFC championship game. Okay, you're going to really wish you had picked up that fifth-year option from Chase Young because he could cost you $25, $26, $27 million a year. But you realize how good of a problem that is to have? We drafted a guy number 2 overall, and now we got to pay him a bunch of money because he's awesome. That's what you want to happen when a guy gets drafted number 2 overall. Those are the problems you want. And at the end of the day, the problems you're trying to avoid at all times as a franchise is having, whether it's actual dead money because you cut a guy prematurely or essentially dead money, player being paid who's not worth it. And today, the Washington Commanders, by declining Chase Young's fifth-year option, eliminated the possibility that, or greatly reduced the possibility that next year Chase Young will be playing on what is essentially dead money. This is very rare that this happens. The only number 2 overall picks that have ever had their options decline are Greg Robinson, the bust at tackle for the Rams back in the day, and Mitch Trubisky. But it's just the reality of where Chase is at. He hasn't been the guy they wanted him to be. Part of that is injury. Part of that is a lack of discipline and freelancing and contributions to a poor defense that underachieved in 2021. I know the potential is there. I think that there's still some special stuff with him, but you can't get caught up in upside and potential when you're making business decisions. There's a classic sports phrase that potential gets you fired. Because eventually you look back and the guy just never reached it. And because he hasn't reached it yet, despite the, even his rookie year on some level, that defensive rookie of the year was like, yeah, he's the best of the bunch, but look how good he's going to be. Came on really strong at the end of that year. Made some game-changing plays, for sure. Showed you the flashes that you want to see. But was a Pro Bowl player and defensive rookie of the year with should have been an all-pro is actually one of the best defensive ends in football. He was still more potential than production in terms of what people think he can or at least could be. And if you want to play the psychological games of, well, now it's a prove-it year, look what happened to Daron Payne, I guess, I just know this. Purely on a business decision, this was the right move to not extend Chase Young because there's no chance you're now going to pay him $17 million next year after he's had a poor season where you wish you had just cut him loose. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And when we get back, we look ahead to a loaded night of NBA action.
This is DC's
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live as well on YouTube, youtube.com/@theteam980. Appreciate y'all checking us out there. Us, of course, me, Craig Hoffman, and him. That's our super producer, Anthony Haney, showing off his pearly whites to the camera.
I need to fix my lighting in here, man. I'm dark.
Yeah. Pull that down, see what happens. This is only for the people that are watching on YouTube, but that's fine. Anthony now pulling down, or Anthony's trying to pull down the blinds. All right, I can't see. Is that one actually moving? I guess it is. Because I saw the other one is the one that's the problem. And I saw Anthony stand up and then start like doing something, and it was just a total nothing burger from my vantage point. I didn't realize there was another blind over there. Oh, there, look at him. Look at it. We can see Anthony in all of his glory. Well, not all of his glory, but you get what I'm saying.
Yes, sir.
All right. Which of the 4 games are you most excited about in the NBA playoffs tonight?
Is that a trick question? You already know I'm watching
Of course. Well, you were going to go Kings Warriors. I thought you were going to say Grizzlies Lakers.
No, I had you. I'm going Lakers Grizz. I was going to say Kings, but then I was going
Yeah,
nah.
You're a LeBron guy.
Yes, sir. 7:30. I'm locked in.
I think that is also my favorite, in part just because it starts at 7:30.
Oh, so this is
Kings,
more so for your sleep schedule, huh?
Yeah, I mean, Kings, if they all started at 8, here's a fun question. By the way, this seems relevant a little bit. The NBA announced today that all the weekday games during the NBA Finals are getting bumped up an hour. So no later than an 8:30 start. Hallelujah, praise the Lord, because those 9 p.m. tips on like a Thursday night were awful.
Man, sometimes they creep into the 12 o'clock hour, and you're just like, yo.
You can't be doing this. It's a school night. I understand the West Coast, you're trying to let people get home. They can watch it work. People work from home now.
Yep.
Figure it out. Anyway, the point is, if all of these games started at 8 o'clock tonight, and you can only watch one, which one would you watch?
First of all, Craig, before I answer your question, I'm already upset that the NBA decided to have 4 games in one night when all of these games have been so good.
Yeah, these are probably the 4 best
Exactly.
series.
So I'm already upset about that. But if I had to pick one game to watch, I think I would lean towards the Kings Warriors just because I think that series is the most interesting. I think the Lakers are going to finish out, the Grizz tonight, but I don't know who's going to win that Warriors Kings series, so I think that's the one I would have watched.
All right, let's go 2 minutes or so per game. We'll start with that one then. Kings Warriors, 2 minutes on the clock. I'm actually going to run a clock. Here we go. All right, the Kings have been excellent at home all year. Obviously, the biggest thing for them is De'Aaron Fox has his fractured fingertip. The Warriors have been hellaciously bad on the road all year. They won 11 games on the road all year. They obviously lost the 2 games earlier to Sacramento. That said, I think the Warriors actually show up for this one on the road. Part of that is just like their championship team. They've been there. They've done that. But part of that is, unless De'Aaron Fox is awesome, I don't think the Kings can win because their offense is so Fox-centric. It's Fox pick and rolls. It's Fox ISOs. Like, he is so essential to what they do, and the Warriors are going to score even if they struggle to get stops. Him just going from 38 points to 22 is enough for the Kings to lose. And to me, it's that simple. Domas Sabonis has been better than people think, but I just think that the Warriors have too much. They've got that championship medal, and a downgraded De'Aaron Fox is too much for the Kings to overcome.
If the Kings are gonna squeak out one at home, they're gonna need a big game from Domantas Sabonis. I think he's played, okay for this series, but De'Aaron is definitely gonna be hampered by the finger injury. And as you said, he's the catalyst to that offense. They go as he goes. And if he can't be 100, then you have to look for your second best player. And we've seen Sabonis have big games, so they're going to need one if they want to win tonight.
It's going to be interesting. They've played Sabonis off and basically been like, go ahead, come down the lane, drive. Yep. And they've forced him into taking jump shots, and he hasn't been willing to. I think he's got to come out willing to shoot and make jumpers. Like, he's got to come out arrogant about taking jumpers tonight. They also need way more from Kevin Huerter. That's the other guy that's been a key for them. Like, Monk has been fantastic. They need more from Kevin Huerter. He a Terp. Otherwise, they are in trouble. All right, that's our 2 minutes on that one. Next game that we were going to talk about, I think we agreed, or next game on our excitement meter is Lakers-Grizzlies. Does Dylan Brooks' Grizzlies career come to an end tonight?
Oh, yes, it will. LeBron and them, they're going in there to get the dub, man. They need rest. You know, Anthony Davis, he's always banged up, I think.
Always.
Exactly.
Stays banged up.
I think them going in there with that on their mind, rest on their mind, I think this is a good chance because guess what? They'll have to play the winner of Golden State and the Kings, and that game is – I mean, that series is obviously going at least 6. So, big game for the Lakers tonight. Big game from Anthony Davis. He didn't play that well last 2 nights ago. So, I think he comes out, he dominates, and the Lakers go in and win.
That is exactly what I think is going to happen as well. I think this Grizzlies team is fatally flawed without some of the pieces that are missing for them. I think it's important to remember that Brandon Clark and Steven Adams are massive parts of what the Grizzlies did to get that 2 seed in the Western Conference. They were the best offensive rebounding team in the league, and it was because Steven Adams is the best offensive rebounder in the league. He just creates extra possessions for them that they're not getting right now. And I do think that Anthony Davis tends to be very up, very down, very up, very down. Like, he bounces back quickly and then immediately falls off again. Well, he's due for a big night. And I do think also LeBron probably is ready to kind of go into kill mode. And he has become one of the greatest clutch players we've ever seen. And, like, for what his reputation was earlier in his career, which wasn't even well-earned, to see the amount of clutch plays he's made, including the game-sealing layup the other night, game-tying basket, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, the other night. They're all merging together. I think that LeBron is going to come out and just be like, all right, Ja, your time's coming, but my time is now. Almost in the same way that, like, Tim Duncan did this to LeBron in the 2007 finals. He was like, your time's coming, but I'm not dead yet. Yep. And I feel like that's what LeBron is going to do to Ja and them tonight. Obviously, they need Ja to be fantastic. He's battling, but I just don't think they have enough. I think the Lakers are going to take it home on the road in Memphis. And then Dylan Brooks is never going to play for Memphis again.
Where does he go?
I don't care. Hopefully, like, Charlotte. Somewhere in the NBA abyss.
I mean, the Wizards will be the team to sign. I'm just saying.
If the Wizards sign, I thought about this earlier today. What am I? I'm going to make this about me. What do I do if the Wizards sign Dylan Brooks?
You run into a wall?
I mean, that sounds less painful than having to watch Dylan Brooks play.
I don't know, man.
This feels like one of those things that you see on the internet. Radio host says if team signs player, he'll quit. He just signed. So I'm not going to say I'm going to quit if they sign Dylan Brooks. But I really hope for an organization that's trying to, like, build a new culture, Dylan Brooks isn't a part of it. So we'll see where he winds up. It feels like Minnesota. They're a dumpster fire. That seems... Did he used to play there? No, he's been in Memphis the whole time.
He's been in Memphis.
Anyway, all right. Off we go. We got New York, Cleveland, Miami, Milwaukee. Let's go New York, Cleveland. I think Miami, Milwaukee, even though the stakes are incredibly high, is actually the least interesting. But also, I don't know. We'll get there. 2 minutes on the clock. New York, Cleveland. Ready, set, go. This is going to be an incredible crowd in Cleveland. Like, the atmosphere is going to be crazy. Donovan Mitchell was terrible. I actually think Cleveland extends this thing out to 6, and then you have this massive Game 6 situation going at Madison Square Garden in a couple of days from now. I think Cleveland is going to give one last gasp. I think Mitchell's going to be fantastic. I think Garland will be good. And I also don't necessarily trust the Knicks to close things out. They've got the kind of weird Julius Randle situation going. R.J. Barrett's been phenomenal for them, but can Barrett do it on the road compared to doing it at home? If he can't, they're going to lose. If he can, well, they're good. Like, Jalen Brunson will be fine. He'll get his numbers. He'll be good. The question is, can enough Knicks show up on the road in Cleveland to beat a really talented Cavs team that is probably the better team overall, and then at home, can they perform up to that standard? That's what I think happens in this one. That's kind of my vantage point of it. All the talent in Cleveland comes to play. They come together. Knicks, can't quite close it out, but I could also see it going the other way, where the Cavs feel defeated and the Knicks are super confident and they go ahead and close this thing out in 5.
Yeah, I think Cleveland definitely bounces back. They've been fantastic at home all season, and I think they win this game actually. But I'm curious to see how Julius Randle responds after he was benched in the last game. He didn't even address the media last game, so I think that's more so what I'm focusing in on. I think that Cleveland does go out and get the dub though.
Yeah, I agree. All right, then quickly, last game, reset the clock. Miami, Milwaukee. There is I'm going to say no way because that just feels stupid. But, it took 56 points from Jimmy Butler and Milwaukee getting nothing from a bunch of guys who usually give them something for Miami to win that game the other night once Giannis was back in the lineup. I also think Giannis is going to have to spend a little bit more time on Butler. I think every minute that Butler's in the game, he should be being guarded by Drew Holiday or Giannis. And I think they miss Dante DiVincenzo a lot because he's another guy that could take that assignment. They've got to rebound the ball a lot better. But I think if you kind of give Giannis the mindset of here's exactly what we need from you. We need you to go out, play with force offensively, guard Jimmy, and protect the rim, and then rebound your face off, that Giannis is going to have 30 and 20 or something crazy. And if they can get their shooters to hit shots at home, they'll be fine tonight. The question is, can they then do that 3 times in a row? I think it's very possible. They were the best team in basketball all year. They get hot. Their shooters get hot. They're not losing possibly to anybody. But there is also a real possibility that this team just feels deflated, defeated for whatever reason, and Miami will not beat themselves. They will come out and play hard, and Jimmy's going to have a big night because that's what he does in the playoffs, and we'll see how it goes. They've gotten it's just hard, man, because they've gotten contributions from Duncan Robinson, for instance, who hasn't played all year. So how are you supposed to expect what to expect from them? But I expect Milwaukee to win this game. That's the official prediction.
I too have Milwaukee winning the game and the series. I think they pull off the 3-1 upset, come from behind type of thing. Jimmy Butler is one of my favorite players, but I think Mike Budenholzer, I think Giannis, they're all going to get desperate, and you got to take them out the game. The only other person that's killed them literally this series is your guy, Duncan Robinson, who they haven't been able to scout. But guess what? You've had a couple of games to be able to scout Duncan Robinson and what he's doing.
Here's the scout. He's tall and shoots threes.
Exactly.
Don't let him shoot.
Exactly. Take him out the game. Take Jimmy all the way out the game, and let's see what the Miami Heat can do without him.
I like it. All right. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We get back. We close out the show with real things, real people said into real microphones. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube as well at youtube.com/@theteam980. And actually, Anthony, want to take a quick second before we hit real things. For those that are watching on YouTube, you can see, talk about my fit today. You like it? You like this denim situation?
Yeah. Are you going somewhere after the show?
I'm not going anywhere after the show. But wearing the denim jacket today and actually some jeans. I've got real pants on as opposed to radio pants, aka sweatpants. But the denim today is not just for style. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and there's been all kinds of great stuff going on all month long with a bunch of different great organizations that help support victims and also do prevention work in the sexual assault space. And today is Denim Day, which is a very important day in the month because it raises awareness for this. Seems like a guy with a radio show be a good place to, raise awareness. Often you hear around issues of sexual assault, well, she was asking for it. And that is often tied to clothing. And Denim Day started years ago after an Italian court actually ruled in some form or fashion that because a woman was wearing tight jeans that she was asking for what happened to her. Sexual assault doesn't happen because of what someone wears. It doesn't happen for any other reason other than someone, the assaulter, takes the bodily autonomy of another human being and does things to them against their will. That is why these things happen. It has nothing to do with clothing. It has nothing to do with anything else. And so Denim Day is a reminder of that. And so I'm happy to wear not only a jean jacket, but some jeans, my denim today in support of Denim Day and Sexual Assault Awareness Month. If you want more information on anything related to Sexual Assault Awareness Month, how you can help make a difference, I would highly suggest going to settheexpectation.org, where they've got tons of great information on what you can do to be a part in the fight against sexual and domestic violence. And you can also donate to that great organization. A bunch of local athletes work with it, including James Smith-Williams of the Commanders, who's been very active and vocal. Andy Sullivan from the Spirit works with them as well. So settheexpectation.org if you would like to help out. And happy Denim Day to all who are participating and helping in that fight. With that, we get to real things. Real people said into real microphones.
Real things.
We're not going to be so this year.
Real people.
5 and 11. Not very good.
Said into real microphones.
The culture is actually damn good.
All right, we didn't get to this one yesterday, and I was super bummed that we didn't. Weston McKennie, U.S. men's national team soccer player, playing for Leeds United over in England, did an interview with our guy, Raj, over at Men in Blazers. And Raj asked him, hey, have you ever had English tea? What happened when you tried English tea for the first time? Here's what Weston McKennie said.
Weston, you told Cellini that Italian coffee doesn't suit your digestive system. Does English tea also make you, feel the need?
It probably wasn't the best place to try it, but I tried English tea with milk for the first time, but it was on a train. So I don't know, it's probably not a good thing, but I was up and out of the train into the hotel, into my bathroom very quick.
At least I guess it hit at the right time, that he was able to get out of Dodge. I will say one of my low-key hilarious favorite moments in England when I was there was in a bathroom on a train. I realize how weird the way I phrased that sounded, but the voice of the bathroom was a guy that had won a contest to be the voice of the loo. And he was just like some regular bloke from Manchester, so he's like, hey, it's Jason from Manchester. I'm the voice of the loo. It's too stupid to make up, Anthony. Don't you dare look at me like that.
That's actually crazy, Craig.
It was hilarious. He was like, hey, make sure you lock the door. Hey, good job. The door's locked. I don't remember everything that he said. I just remember, dying laughing.
I was about to say I would have definitely died laughing.
And also, what a cool contest. Could you imagine if you were the voice of you're on the Amtrak, you're taking in a cell to New York City. And it's like, hey, if you go take a leak, I'll tell you to lock the door. What? Just go try it. It's me. I'm the voice of the bathroom, especially in Britain, because you're not the voice of the bathroom. You're the voice of the loo. Guess Weston McKinney got to meet the loo on the train. Devin Booker last night, another 40-point game as the Suns close out the Clippers. That's his 6th. That is the most in Phoenix Suns history, passing Charles Barkley's 5, who we then joined on the postgame show on TNT.
Tonight, Devin Booker passes Charles Barkley for the most 40-point season history.
Thank you. You passed the bum. Passed the bum, Devin. Congratulations, man. Well deserved. Thank you, Devin. I don't want to hear his name no more in Phoenix. Coco 5, Coco 35.
I got it. Thank you, Book. We appreciate you, man.
Why is Shaq calling Chuck a bum?
Dog, those two dudes are hilarious, man.
The funny thing is they love and adore each other.
They do.
But Shaq is just incapable of showing affection in a way that is not, hey, you big dummy.
You big dummy.
I hate you so much. You suck. You weren't actually that good of a basketball player.
That's how some people show love, man.
You got no rings.
You ringless.
It was pretty funny. I guess Chuck's playoff career high was higher than Shaq's. And so they showed a graphic that had Chuck's on it, and Shaq was nowhere to be found. And Charles started looking under the table. It's pretty funny. All right, you missed any part of the show? Make sure you check it out in the podcast feed, rewind on the Odyssey app or on YouTube. And we'll see you tomorrow back here on the Team 980. Hey, I'm Craig Hoffman.
And I'm Logan Paulson.
And together we host the Take Command podcast.